Welcome to Qatar, a peninsula situated in the east of Arabia, bordering the Persian Gulf and Saudi Arabia. Qatar was formerly a colony of Great Britain. In 1971, it gained its independence. At the time, it was basically a forgotten Arabian desert, and it ranked as one of the poorest economies in the Middle East. During that time, it heavily relied on the fishing industry, and as such, Qatar was a forgotten emirate amongst the Arab Peninsula. Fast forward to today, Qatar will host the 2022 Football World Cup. Its capital Doha is home to the world's tallest and modern skyscrapers. Doha houses some of the finest restaurants on the planet, the most luxurious hotels the world has ever seen. Today, the growing powerhouses within Southeast Asia are heavily reliant on Qatari gas to fuel their appetite for growth. Qatar is home to Al Jazeera, one of the world's leading media organizations, providing it with considerable influence across the Gulf and the Middle East. Qatar Airways ranks as one of the best airlines in the world, and Doha is increasingly becoming a major hub for the airline industry. Qatar, which was nothing more than an empty desert pre-1971, is now increasingly influential in matters not only of the Middle East but across the globe. Its sovereign wealth fund is amongst the biggest players in global investments, its royal family amongst the richest, all making Qatar an ever-increasing influential player in geopolitical affairs. Welcome to Economic Truth, where we break down the economics behind our globe. And in this video, we break down Qatar, a nation on the rise. Over the last 3 decades, Qatar has transformed itself into one of the richest, most influential economies across the globe. This success has been based on its vast natural resources, primarily oil and gas. The Qataris, via the royal family, have undergone a path of long-term development, ambitious goals, and a meticulous strategy to achieve this wondrous feat. This has made Qatar the preeminent superpower in the Middle East and erred its rivals such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So how did Qatar achieve this? See, having natural resources doesn't guarantee success. Having an abundance of the world's energy does not ensure your economic growth, nor the prosperity of your domestic population. Take the examples of Venezuela or Iraq as a precursor that natural resources don't guarantee your place at the table. Qatar has used its abundance of gas and oil to ensure its place amongst the leading nations across the globe, to ensure the prosperity of its people, to ensure the stability of its royal family, thereby increasing their influence in all areas of modern society, from technology to sport, media and consumerism. Qatar has not rested, has been and is on the move, and their rise is quite amazing. So how does a country that is smaller in land size than that of California turn itself into one of the preeminent superpowers across the Gulf? How does a country with a domestic population of less than 3 million, a small military, gain such influence? Qatar didn't discover its first oil fields until the early 1940s. But it wasn't its oil fields that made Qatar who it is. The jewel in the crown came in 1971 when the world's largest gas field was discovered off the coast of Qatar. It would be called the North Field. The Qataris did not proceed with development of the North Field immediately. In fact, it took them nearly a decade to show any urgency with the discovery. See, at the time, oil production in the emirate was high, and as such, there was no urgency. That would change in the 1980s with the crash of the oil price, combined with the fact that the emir of the time was siphoning off oil revenues to increase his personal wealth. In 1989, they began plans to develop the North Field, but once again, progress was quite slow. Fast forward to 1995, and this is where everything would change. This is Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, who ruled Qatar until 2013. In 1995, while his father was in Switzerland, Sheikh Hamad took the throne in a bloodless coup. This event would change the entire direction of Qatar forever. Sheikh Hamad realized that the North Field was Qatar's ace in the deck, and that natural gas would be a sought-after commodity to fuel globalism and growth within emerging markets. However, Qatar had a problem. Its coastline was too far away from the world's growth centers, and the infrastructure needed to build pipelines to transport the gas would be costly, risky, and would take a great amount of time. They needed to innovate. They invested for the future, and they invested big in the area of liquefaction. Liquefaction of gases is the process by which substances in their gaseous state are converted to the liquid state, which removes enough energy to make the change from a gaseous to the liquid state. Basically, after this process, the Qataris had LNG, liquefied natural gas, and a whole load of it which could be transported via shipping. The Qataris invested via joint ventures with the largest energy companies in the world to ramp up production and exports of LNG. Take a look at the following investment undertaken in LNG plant expansion in the decade following the takeover of Sheikh Hamad. This investment in plant expansion meant a production ramp, and as you can see in the following image coming up in front of you now, domestic consumption was quite stable, which meant exports boomed. As exports boomed, the money flowed in. As early as 1997, Qatar began long-term agreements to provide massive amounts of natural gas to Spain and Japan. Over the ensuing years, they would provide gas to China, India, UK, South Korea, and most parts of Southeast Asia. Fast forward to today, Qatar is the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas across the globe. But due to its unwavering attitude to investment and innovation, its greatest achievement is that it is the lowest cost producer of LNG of any nation state. One of the fallouts of the Russian invasion of Ukraine is that Europe will be looking for alternative gas imports, placing a great importance on Qatar in the future. Analysts estimate Europe will need to import around 200 million tons of LNG over the next decade to phase out Russian gas. Take a look at where Qatar exports currently, and you'll see the EU could be a major source of revenue, but more importantly, a major source of geopolitical influence for the Qataris in the future. Now remember, being abundant in natural resources does not guarantee success. While developing its North Field and becoming the world's best at LNG production, Qatar was simultaneously working at three major strategic objectives. The first one was security. Realizing the region's history of violence, the Qataris sought to ensure that it could at least make others think about possible incursions or acts of aggression against the state. It has had a history of close cooperation with Iran, making it less desirable to deal with, and it had to contend with big brother Saudi Arabia, placing pressure on it. As early as 1992, the Qataris began intimate military ties with the United States of America. However, in 2003, they would ensure that these ties were strengthened. In that same year, Saudi Arabia requested the US to take its troops out of their country. Qatar saw this as an opportunity, and they seized upon it. It presented itself as a new destination for US troops. They spent more than $1 billion on building military bases within the state. Qatar is now home to the Al Ubaid Air Base and the Al Sayala Army Base. The Al Ubaid Air Base is one of the largest American bases outside of the United States and provides a great level of security for the Qataris. The second strategic move the Qataris did while pumping out LNG was diversification. They were well aware of the volatile nature of being a commodity producer, as well as the fact that the world would wean itself off oil and gas eventually. As such, they had a desire to build an economy beyond oil and gas. Over the past decade, Qatar has invested heavily in establishing a modern financial sector to become the financial capital of the Middle East. It has provided incentives for foreign companies to establish headquarters in the desert nation to ensure growth and prosperity in the decades to come. Qatar has sought to diversify its economy through industrialization and modernization, investing heavily in flour milling and cement. Doha, via Qatar Airways, is a major transport hub for holidayers, meaning tourism is an ever-increasing form of global recognition and revenue for the state. The Qatar National Vision 2030, published by the government, aims at transforming Qatar into an advanced country by 2030, capable of sustaining its own development and providing for a high standard of living for all of its people for generations to come. The third strategic move in Qatar's aim at longevity has been building a portfolio of assets for the future. In 2005, Qatar announced the establishment of the Qatar Investment Authority, its sovereign wealth fund. The sovereign wealth fund invests the money it receives from oil and gas revenues to make its economy more resilient and reduce the dependence on these commodities in the long term. The fund, now estimated to be north of $450 billion US, is currently the 10th largest in the world. Since 2005, Qatar has acquired considerable property portfolios in Europe and the United States. To name some of these are the likes of Chelsea Barracks, London Olympic Village, Empire State Building, the London Park Lane Hotel, and the Le Grand Hotel in Paris. In Singapore, the Qatar Investment Authority purchased one of the well-known Asia Square towers from BlackRock for $2.5 billion. It was the largest office transaction in Singapore's history. Its appetite for assets hasn't stopped at property. The Qatar Investment Authority has ownership stakes in companies such as Volkswagen, Porsche, Valentino Fashion Group, Barclays, and Total France, just to name a few. In the last decade, however, the fund has shifted from being the first point of call for capital for large public companies to investing in technology in sectors of the future. It has been very busy in India, where it recently invested in food delivery platform Swiggy and cloud kitchen startup Rebel Food. Elsewhere, the Qatar Investment Authority has led a funding round for a Turkish artificial intelligence unicorn, invested in a UK digital lender, and bought a minority stake in a firm that builds aerospace tech. The Qataris are ensuring that they are well diversified and on top of modern trends. Qatar has also attempted to gain a major influence through sport, acquiring Paris Saint-Germain in France and taking further minority and majority ownership in a number of European football clubs. Qatar Airways is the major sponsor of Barcelona Football Club, one of the world's largest, and of course Qatar is host of the 2022 World Cup, which in all estimates say they will spend in excess of $200 billion hosting. Qatar's every move since 1995 has been to ensure that it can prosper long after the world desires their oil and gas, and it has succeeded to this point. Qatar is a viable challenger to Saudi Arabia as a superpower of the Gulf and Middle East, a notable achievement considering the rising influence of the Gulf in general. Let's go back to 1995. If you had said to any commentator, Qatar would be the first Middle Eastern African nation to host a football World Cup, you would have been laughed out of the room. Qatar is now one of the richest nations on the planet, with vaulting visions, but the stadiums, hotels and towers are symbolic of an ever-rising influence of Qatar.